If you love stories about animals that touch your heart, you're in the right place. Hit that like button now, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because this story will change the way you see the connection between humans and animals. And stay until the end, because what happens with this animal will leave you speechless. Dawn was breaking over the forest edge. The sky was pale gray, bleeding into soft pink, and the snow fell in silence, thick, heavy, endless. John drove slowly along the empty road, his truck tires crunching through fresh powder, his breath fogging the windshield. And then he saw it. A tiny shape in the middle of the road, dark against the white snow, not moving. He stopped, got out, walked closer, his boots sinking deep with every step. A puppy. Or at least, that's what it looked like. Its fur was soaked, frozen stiff. Its tiny body trembled weakly. John knelt down, his gloved hand reaching out, and the puppy's eyes opened. Slowly, and the way it looked at him, it wasn't normal. Not at all. John was a man who'd learned to live with ghosts. 3 years ago, he'd lost everything. His wife, Emma. His daughter, Lily. A winter highway accident. Black ice. No survivors. He'd tried to move on. Tried to rebuild. But the silence in his house was unbearable. He worked as a ranger on the edge of the national forest. Loned. Quiet. Safe. He didn't want to care about anything anymore. But when he looked down at that tiny, dying creature in the snow, something cracked open inside him. Something he thought had frozen solid. "I can't leave you here," he whispered. The puppy didn't respond. Its breathing was shallow, barely there. John scooped it up gently, cradling it against his chest inside his heavy coat. The animal was so cold it felt like holding ice wrapped in fur. He ran back to the truck, turned the heat on full blast, and wrapped the puppy in an emergency blanket from the back seat. For 15 minutes, he just sat there in the growing light of dawn, holding the fragile body, willing it to live. Slowly, the trembling stopped. The breathing steadied. And then, those eyes opened again. And they looked at him. Not like a puppy. Like something that knew him. Like something that was studying him. John shook his head, telling himself he was imagining things. But deep down, he felt it. Something about this animal was wrong. By the time John got home, the puppy had warmed enough to stand. He set it down carefully on a towel near the wood stove, and watched as it rose shakily onto 4 legs. It was small, maybe 2 pounds. Gray and white fur with reddish undertones. Oversized ears. A bushy tail. "You're safe now," John said softly. But the puppy didn't wag its tail, didn't whimper, didn't make a sound. It just stood there, perfectly still, staring at him. And the way it looked at him, it was too direct, too focused, too intelligent. John shook his head and went to the kitchen. He warmed some milk, poured it into a bowl, and set it on the floor. The puppy sniffed it once, turned away, refused to drink. John tried kibble. The puppy looked at it like it was poison. Then, on instinct, John opened the fridge and pulled out some raw venison he'd been saving. He tore off a small piece and held it out. The puppy's entire demeanor changed. Its ears shot forward. Its nose twitched. Its eyes locked onto the meat, with laser focus. And in one lightning-fast movement, it snatched the venison from John's hand and tore into it. Not like a dog. Like something wild. That first night, John couldn't sleep. The house was silent, but it felt, watched. Then he heard it. A soft, high-pitched sound from the corner of the room. Not a bark. Not a whine. A chirp. Sharp. Quick. Like a bird call. John sat up, his heart pounding, and looked toward the makeshift bed he'd set up near the closet. The puppy was standing on its hind legs, front paws pressed against the window, staring out into the darkness. And the way it stood, the way it moved, it wasn't normal. For just a moment, John could have sworn he saw something outside. Another shape in the trees. Watching back, the next morning, John noticed more. The puppy moved differently than any dog he'd ever seen. Its steps were silent. Too silent. It could leap onto furniture with impossible grace, landing softly, perfectly balanced. And it watched everything. Not with curiosity, with calculation. When John opened a drawer, the puppy's eyes tracked the movement. When John walked to the door, the puppy followed 3 steps behind, always in shadow. And when John spoke, the puppy tilted its head, ears rotating independently like satellite dishes. Processing. Understanding. And always, it looked at him that way. Like it knew something he didn't. Despite the strangeness, despite the creeping unease, John couldn't bring himself to let the animal go. He named it Ember. Because of the eyes that seemed to burn with hidden fire. Because of the way it had risen from the frozen dawn like something born from ash and snow. Over the next week, Ember grew. Fast. Too fast. Within days, it had doubled in size. Its legs lengthened. Its snout sharpened. Its ears grew tall and pointed. But it never barked. Never played like a puppy. It hunted. John would watch it stalk shadows across the floor, pouncing with perfect precision. It would sit by the window for hours, motionless, watching the forest. Waiting. And yet, despite all of this, Ember stayed, followed John everywhere. Slept beside his bed. Sat at his feet while he ate. And on the nights when John broke down, when the memories of Emma and Lily became too much, Ember would climb into his lap. Silent, steady, warm. One night, John sat on the floor, his back against the couch, tears streaming down his face. And Ember pressed its body against his chest, resting its head on his shoulder. And when John looked down, Ember looked back. And in those eyes, John saw something impossible. Understanding. Compassion. As if this creature, whatever it was, knew his pain. "You're all I have now," John whispered into the soft fur. And Ember blinked slowly. Once, as if to say, "I know." But the strangeness didn't stop. It escalated. Ember's teeth grew sharper. Its jaw stronger. It refused all dog food, now only raw meat. And it ate with a ferocity that made John's stomach tighten. One afternoon, John's neighbor, Paul, stopped by. "Heard you got yourself a dog?" Paul said, grinning. "Mind if I meet him?" John hesitated. But then Ember trotted into the room. Paul's grin vanished. He stared. And Ember stared back. And the way Ember looked at Paul, it made Paul take a step backward. "John," he said slowly, "that's not a dog. What are you talking about?" Paul knelt down, keeping his distance. Ember stood perfectly still, watching him with unblinking intensity. "Look at the snout. The ears. The tail. The way it moves." Paul stood up, his face pale. "John, that's a fox." "That's ridiculous. I grew up hunting. I know a fox when I see one." Paul backed toward the door, never taking his eyes off Ember. "And the way it looks at you, John, that's not normal. That's not right." That night, John watched Ember more carefully. The way it moved too fluid, too fast, too precise. The way it hunted a mouse that had gotten into the house pouncing with deadly accuracy, breaking its neck instantly. The way it growled at Paul's dog through the window, not a bark, but a low rumbling snarl that sent the other animal fleeing in terror. And the eyes, always the eyes, looking at him in that strange, knowing way, as if it could see right through him. As if it understood things no animal should understand. John pulled out his phone and typed, "Fox puppy eyes intelligence." The results made his blood run cold. Red fox kits often mistaken for puppies. Highly intelligent, problem-solving abilities, rival primates. Illegal to keep as pets. He scrolled further. Warning signs. Refuses dog food. Hunts instinctively. Makes chirping sounds. Unusually aware of surroundings. Okay, every single sign matched. John looked at Ember, curled on the couch. Okay, and Ember looked back. And in that look, John saw the truth. "What are you?" he whispered. Ember didn't move. But the way it looked at him, it was like it was asking the same question. "What are you?" Paul returned the next day. This time, he wasn't alone. "John, this is Alina," Paul said. "She's a wildlife biologist. She needs to see your dog." Alina was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and serious. She stepped inside without waiting for permission, her gaze sweeping the room. Where is it? John pointed to the corner, where Ember lay on a blanket. Elena approached slowly, carefully. She knelt down, studying Ember's face, its body, its posture. And Ember looked at her. That same intense, knowing look. Elena's face went white. She stood up quickly, her jaw tight. Where exactly did you find this animal? On the road? Near the forest edge. Why? Elena pulled out her phone, typing rapidly. John, she said quietly, her voice shaking slightly. This is not a dog. This is a red fox. A wild red fox kit. John's stomach dropped. That's impossible. It's been living with me for over a week. It's gentle. It's a predator, Elena interrupted. Her voice was firm but not unkind. And based on the markings, the eye structure, the size, and the behavior, she looked at Ember again. And Ember looked back. And Elena visibly shivered. I think this might be a Sierra Nevada red fox. One of the rarest subspecies in North America. Critically endangered. Less than 50 left in the wild. The room spun. And John, Elena added, her voice dropping to almost a whisper, the way it looks at you. I've worked with wild animals for 20 years. I've never seen anything like that. It's like it's... She trailed off. Like it's what? John demanded. Elena met his eyes. Like it's choosing to be here. She shook her head. You need to take it to a vet. Now. And then you need to call wildlife services. This animal doesn't belong here. John? No matter how much it seems like it does. John drove in numb silence. Ember sat in a carrier in the passenger seat, watching him through the bars. And the way Ember looked at him, it made John's chest ache. At the clinic, Dr. Rivera, a veterinarian who specialized in exotic animals, took one look at Ember, and her entire expression changed. Where did you get this? I found it. In the snow. She didn't respond. She just lifted Ember onto the examination table and began a thorough inspection, checking teeth, paws, eyes, bone structure. She used a penlight to examine the pupils. And when she did, Ember's eyes reflected the light. Glowed. Bright amber fire. Dr. Rivera stepped back. She turned to John, her face grave. This, she said slowly, is not what you think it is. What do you mean? She pulled up an image on her computer. A red fox in the wild, eyes glowing in the flash of a camera. This is a fox. A wild red fox. And based on the facial markings, the ear size, and the eye coloration, she zoomed in on another image. This might be a Sierra Nevada red fox. One of the rarest animals in North America. Critically endangered. John felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. That's impossible. Dr. Rivera's voice was soft but firm. He was never a puppy, John. He was never meant to be yours. She paused, looking at Ember again. But the way he looks at you, I've examined hundreds of wild animals. They don't look at humans like that. They just don't. What are you saying? Dr. Rivera shook her head. I'm saying that somehow, for some reason, this wild animal has bonded with you. And that's extraordinary. But it doesn't change what needs to happen next. Dr. Rivera explained everything. Ember wasn't a dog. He was a red fox kit, possibly a critically endangered Sierra Nevada red fox. His eyes weren't just reflective. They had a layer called topitum lucidum, an adaptation for hunting at night. That's why they glowed. His refusal to eat dog food wasn't strange. It was biological. Foxes are obligate carnivores, evolved to hunt small prey. His intelligence, his silence, his movements, the way he looked at John, all of it was fox behavior. People mistake fox kids for puppies all the time, Dr. Rivera said. Especially in winter when they're desperate and alone. But they're wild animals, John. No matter how much they bond with you, they're not domesticated. They can't be. She pulled up more images. Maps. Data. The Sierra Nevada red fox was thought to be extinct for decades. But in recent years, we've found small populations surviving in remote mountain regions. If Ember is one of them, She looked at John, her eyes serious. Then He's not just rare, John. He's irreplaceable. His DNA, his bloodline, it could be crucial for the survival of the entire subspecies. John sat in silence, his world collapsing. So, what happens now? Dr. Rivera's voice softened. We contact the wildlife authorities. They'll assess him. If he's healthy and young enough, they'll try to reintroduce him to the wild. If not, he'll go to a breeding program to help save his species. And if I keep him... Her eyes were sad. Then you're breaking federal law. And you're condemning him to a life he was never meant to live. No matter how much he looks at you, like he understands. No matter how much it feels like he chose you. She paused. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is let go. Word spread like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone in the small mountain town knew that John had been living with an endangered wild fox. The reactions were explosive. Some people were fascinated. That's incredible. He saved an endangered species. That fox chose him. Others were furious. He broke the law. What if it had rabies? Wild animals don't belong in homes. He should be arrested. The local news picked up the story. A reporter showed up at John's door with a camera crew. Mr. Haynes, is it true you've been harboring a critically endangered fox? Is it true the fox looks at you like it understands you? Do you think you have a special connection? John didn't answer. He closed the door. But online, the story went viral. Social media exploited hashtag Save Ember, hashtag Let Him Go, hashtag Wildlife Matters, hashtag The Way It Looked at Him. Videos, photos, arguments raging in the comments. Some called John a hero who saved a dying animal. Others called him reckless and selfish. And through it all, Ember sat by the window, silent and still, watching the forest. And every so often, he would turn and look at John. That same look. The one that wasn't normal. The one that said everything without saying anything at all. The wildlife officer arrived on a cold, gray morning. Her name was Sarah. She was kind, professional, but firm. I know this is hard, she said gently, but it's the right thing. John looked at Ember. The fox sat on the couch, staring back at him. And for a long moment, they just looked at each other. John saw everything in those eyes. The night he found Ember in the snow. The way Ember had survived against all odds. The silent companionship. The understanding. The bond that shouldn't have existed but did. And John realized something. Ember had never been his. From the very beginning, Ember had been wild, patient, tolerant, but never tame. The bond they'd shared wasn't ownership. It was something deeper. Something rare. A moment of connection between two beings who'd both been lost. And now, John had to honor that. Where will you take him? There's a rehabilitation center in the northern mountains. If he's healthy, if he can hunt, we'll release him back into the wild. Where he belongs. Where his species needs him. John knelt down. He looked into Ember's eyes one last time. I'm sorry, he whispered. I thought I was saving you. But maybe you were saving me. He reached out slowly. And Ember leaned forward, pressing his head into John's hand. Just once. A goodbye. John opened the carrier door. Ember stepped inside without hesitation. No struggle. No resistance. As if he'd always known this day would come. As Sarah lifted the carrier, Ember looked at John one last time. And in that look, John saw everything. Gratitude. Understanding. Goodbye. And something else. Something that said, "You'll be okay, I promise." And then he was gone. 3 months later, John stood at the forest edge at dawn. The snow had melted. Spring was coming. He'd received a letter from the Wildlife Center. Ember was successfully reintroduced. GPS tracking shows he's thriving. He's been observed with other foxes. You gave him a second chance. You gave his species a second chance. John stared into the trees, his breath fogging in the cool morning air. And then he saw it. A flash of red among the pines. A fox, standing at the tree line. Watching him. And the way it looked at him, John's breath caught. It was the same look. That knowing, understanding, impossible look. Ember. For a moment, neither of them moved. Two beings who'd saved each other. Two souls who'd found each other in the darkest winter. And then Ember turned and disappeared into the forest. Free. Wild. Alive. John smiled through his tears. Because he understood now, not all rescues are about keeping. Sometimes, they're about letting go. Sometimes, love means knowing when something doesn't belong to you. Sometimes, the way someone looks at you, whether human or animal, changes everything. Even if only for a moment. Even if you have to say goodbye. John turned and walked back to his truck. Behind him, in the forest, a soft chirp echoed through the trees. A breath of hope. A whisper of life. A reminder that some connections transcend words. That some looks say everything. And that sometimes, the most normal thing in the world, is letting something wild remain wild. Even when it looks at you like it understands. Especially then. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button now and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any emotional stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had a special connection with an animal? I read every single comment. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the greatest love is knowing when to let go. See you in the next story. And that sometimes, the most normal thing in the world, is letting something wild remain wild. Even when it looks at you like it understands. Especially then.